The rain hadn't stopped since dawn, and the city felt heavy under the weight of thunder and gray skies. Inside the towering glass building of Morgan Industries, a janitor in a faded blue uniform mopped the marble floor for the third time that morning. His name was Daniel Cole, a 38-year-old single dad who had spent most of his life cleaning up after people who never once looked down to see him. His hands were rough, his back ached constantly, but his eyes, though tired, still carried a flicker of hope. What no one knew was that by the end of that day, Daniel would do something that would shock the entire company. Something that would make the headlines across the city. Something that would make people question everything they thought they knew about kindness, pain, and redemption. Before we dive deeper into Daniel's unbelievable story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of doing what's right even when it's hard. Daniel's shift usually ended at 6 a.m., but that day, he stayed longer. The fluorescent lights in the lobby buzzed softly as he finished wiping down the last glass panel. He looked at the reflection of himself, sunken eyes, a day-old beard, and a uniform that had lost its color long ago. For most people, he was invisible. But Daniel wasn't just a janitor. He was a father to a little girl named Lily, who had just turned 7 and had more strength in her tiny smile than he could ever find in himself. Life hadn't been kind to Daniel. His wife, Emma, had passed away 3 years ago from cancer, leaving him drowning in medical bills and grief. He lost his job at a construction company shortly after because he missed too many days caring for her. He took the janitorial position out of desperation, anything to keep a roof over Lily's head. Every night, after cleaning the floors of people richer and luckier than he'd ever be, he would go home, cook Lily's favorite noodles, and tell her that things would get better. But inside, he wasn't sure if he believed it anymore. That morning, as Daniel was finishing his work, he overheard 2 employees gossiping near the elevator. "You heard? The CEO's presenting to the board today," one said. "It's a big deal. If she nails this, she's locking in that overseas merger." The CEO, Charlotte Morgan, the woman everyone respected and feared in equal measure. She was known for her cold efficiency and relentless ambition. To Daniel, she was a ghost who walked in heels and perfume, someone whose shadow had passed him by 1,000 times but had never once looked at him. But today would be different. At exactly 8 a.m., Charlotte arrived at the building in her black Mercedes. She had been preparing for this day for months, a make-or-break meeting with investors that could change her career forever. But when she stepped out of her car, she froze. Both her front tires were slashed. The rubber hung limp and lifeless, and the air hissed faintly as if mocking her. Her face turned pale. The meeting was in less than an hour. Security cameras were reviewed immediately. Within minutes, the culprit was identified. The footage showed Daniel, quiet, hardworking Daniel, kneeling beside her car in the early hours, a pocket knife in hand, slicing through the tires. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He simply stood up and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the underground parking lot by 8:30. Daniel was standing in the security office, silent, with 2 guards at his side. Charlotte stormed in, heels clicking against the floor like gunshots. You did this," she demanded, her voice sharp and disbelieving. Daniel didn't meet her eyes. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." There was a long silence before she ordered, "Get him out of here." The news spread like wildfire. Employees whispered in the halls. Some said Daniel must have been drunk. Others said he'd finally snapped under the pressure. By noon, he had been suspended, pending termination. But the truth was something no one could have imagined. That night, Daniel sat by Lily's hospital bed. The room was small, the lights dim. His little girl was sleeping, her tiny hand curled around his finger. Machines beeped softly beside her. She had been sick for weeks, her condition worsening each day. Daniel had been fighting to get her treatment at a private clinic that could perform a rare surgery, but the insurance wouldn't cover it, and he couldn't afford the down payment. He had tried everything. Loans, extra shifts, selling his tools. Nothing was enough. The night before the incident, Daniel overheard that the CEO's meeting was about a merger with a medical supplier, a company that handled charitable medical funds. He knew if that meeting succeeded, Morgan Industries would dissolve the foundation that helped low-income families get medical support. It would mean the end of free aid for families like his. His daughter's last chance would vanish, So he did the only thing he could think of. He didn't slash her tires out of hate or rage. He did it to delay her meeting, to buy just a few hours. He knew it was wrong, but he was desperate. He believed if he could get to her somehow, talk to her before the meeting, maybe, just maybe, she'd understand. But fate had its own plans. The next morning, Charlotte sat in her office, furious but curious. Something about Daniel's silence bothered her. Most people who did wrong tried to defend themselves, to justify their actions. But he hadn't. Not once. She asked HR for his file. When she saw it, something inside her cracked. Widow. Single father. Child hospitalized. Late payments to the employee clinic. No disciplinary record. No warnings. Just quiet, constant, invisible hardship. That afternoon, Charlotte visited the hospital. She found Daniel sitting alone outside Lily's room, still in his blue uniform, holding a small paper crane his daughter had made. When he saw her, he stood up quickly, shame flooding his face. But she didn't speak right away. She just looked at the small girl sleeping peacefully behind the glass. Then she said softly, "You did it for her, didn't you?" Daniel nodded, eyes brimming. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said. "I just needed time." Charlotte didn't reply. She simply walked into Lily's room, stood beside her bed, and looked at the frail little girl breathing weakly under the blanket. Something shifted in her heart that she hadn't felt in years. Compassion. Real, painful compassion. By the next morning, Daniel was called back to the office. He expected a police report. Instead, Charlotte handed him an envelope. "Your job is safe," she said. "And so is your daughter." Inside was a check. Enough to cover Lily's surgery and hospital bills. Daniel's legs nearly gave out as tears filled his eyes. He couldn't speak. Charlotte didn't want publicity. She didn't want gratitude. She just said, "You reminded me that sometimes people don't need punishment. They need to be seen." Months passed. Lily's surgery was a success. Her laughter filled their small apartment again. Daniel returned to work, this time as a maintenance supervisor. And every morning, when Charlotte arrived, he'd greet her with a genuine smile. And she'd smile back, quietly remembering the day her tires were slashed and her heart was opened. What no one else knew was that Charlotte had once been like Daniel. Poor, desperate, and invisible. His act of desperation had made her remember who she used to be. It didn't justify what he did, but it awakened something beautiful in both of them. A second chance at humanity. Years later, Lily grew up and became a doctor, dedicating her life to helping children whose parents couldn't afford treatment. When asked what inspired her, she'd always say, "My dad taught me that good people sometimes make mistakes for the right reasons. And someone once showed us kindness when we least deserved it." If this story touched your heart or made you believe that compassion can change lives, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep sharing powerful stories that remind us of what it means to be human.